Marcus Chun pressed his back against the cold metal wall of Cargo Bay 7, listening for footsteps in the corridor beyond. His heart hammered against his ribs as something small and warm shifted inside his maintenance jacket. The tiny claws that had been gently gripping his shirt tightened slightly, and he could feel the rapid breathing of the creature hidden against his chest. He should not be doing this. Every regulation in the Galactic Station Authority Handbook explicitly forbade what he was attempting. Unauthorized transport of unregistered life forms carried a sentence of 20 years in a penal colony. Transport of a Class 5 dangerous species meant life imprisonment or execution, depending on which council member reviewed the case. The thing was, Marcus had never been good at following rules when they made no sense. 3 days ago, he had been performing routine maintenance on the atmosphere processors in Section 12 when he heard the crying. At first, he thought it might be a malfunctioning servo motor or a pressure leak creating an odd whistle. But as he moved deeper into the maintenance tunnels, the sound became unmistakably organic. Something alive was in distress. He found the source in a forgotten storage compartment that should have been empty according to his work orders. Inside a makeshift cage constructed from scrap metal and energy barriers sat the smallest Valdorian he had ever seen. The cub could not have been more than a few weeks old, its silver fur matted and dirty, its large golden eyes filled with terror and exhaustion. Valdorians were apex predators from the Outer Rim territories. Adult specimens stood nearly 3 meters tall, possessed claws that could slice through titanium, and had reflexes faster than most species could even perceive. They were also highly intelligent, capable of complex reasoning and emotional bonds that lasted lifetimes. The Galactic Council had classified them as too dangerous for contact after a series of unfortunate incidents involving colonial settlements. What the Council conveniently ignored was that those incidents had occurred when humans had attempted to cage, experiment on, or hunt adult Valdorians. The species was fiercely protective of their young and territories, but they were not inherently aggressive. Marcus had spent enough time reading xenobiology reports in his spare time to know the difference between a dangerous predator and a scared child. This was definitely a scared child. The cub had pressed itself against the far corner of its prison, making soft whimpering sounds that cut straight through Marcus's chest. Someone had captured it, probably killed its parents, and stuck it in this hidden cage to await transport to some black market buyer or illegal research facility. The thought made his hands clench into fists. Marcus had always been good with animals. As a kid growing up on Europa, he had rescued everything from injured birds to abandoned puppies. His mother used to joke that he could charm a wild tiger into purring. That talent had not diminished when he left Earth to work on the outer stations. He spent the next hour sitting near the cage, speaking in low, gentle tones. The cub gradually stopped whimpering and began to watch him with curiosity instead of pure fear. When he offered it some of his lunch through the energy barrier, it cautiously approached and accepted the food. By the time his shift ended, the little Valdorian was pressing against the front of the cage, trying to get closer to the first kind presence it had encountered. Marcus went back every day for 3 days, bringing food and spending time with the cub. He learned that it was female, approximately 6 weeks old based on the development of her secondary claws, and incredibly intelligent. She began responding to her name, Zara, which meant little star in one of the old Earth languages his grandmother had taught him. She would chirp with excitement when she heard his footsteps approaching and had even learned to mimic some of his words. The problem was that Marcus was not the only one who knew about Zara's existence. On his third visit, he overheard a conversation between 2 security officers in the corridor outside the storage area. They were discussing pickup schedules and transport arrangements for the merchandise in Section 12. One of them mentioned that the buyer was arriving tonight and expected delivery within the hour. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew exactly what kind of buyers dealt in illegal Valdorian cubs, and none of them had good intentions. Some wanted them for underground fighting rings, where they would be starved and tortured until they became the monsters the Council claimed they naturally were. Others wanted them for experimental purposes, testing weapons or medical procedures on a species with rapid healing factors. A few simply wanted exotic trophies. All of those fates were worse than death. He looked down at Zara, who was pressed against the cage barrier, her small hand-like paws reaching toward him. Her golden eyes held trust and affection that no dangerous predator should be capable of feeling toward a human stranger. In that moment, Marcus made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. The security shift change happened at 0200 hours every night. Marcus knew because he often worked late shifts and had memorized the patrol patterns. He also knew that the cargo bay loading docks would be minimally staffed at that time, with only automated systems monitoring the few overnight shipments. Getting Zara out of her cage took some creative engineering, but Marcus had been maintaining station systems for 5 years. He knew which tools could disable an energy barrier without triggering alarms, and which access codes would let him into restricted storage areas. The hard part was convincing Zara to trust him enough to let him pick her up. Valdorian cubs, even young ones, had impressive natural defenses. Zara could extend claws sharp enough to shred his jacket and had reflexes that would make it nearly impossible to grab her if she decided to run. But she had also been watching him for 3 days, learning to associate his presence with food, gentle words, and safety. When he opened the cage and held out his hands, she hesitated for only a moment before walking into his arms. She was heavier than he expected, probably weighing close to 15 kilograms despite her small size. Her fur was incredibly soft beneath the layer of grime, and she was warm like a small furnace against his chest. When he carefully zipped his maintenance jacket over her, she settled against him with a contented purr that vibrated through his entire torso. "Okay, little star," he whispered into the darkness of the storage compartment. "We're going to take a walk. You need to stay very quiet for me, all right?" Zara made a soft chirping sound that he chose to interpret as agreement. The walk from Section 12 to the cargo bay docks took 12 minutes through the maintenance corridors. Marcus had timed it during his lunch break the day before, planning his route to avoid security checkpoints and main passenger areas. His plan was simple: get to Cargo Bay 7, access his personal storage locker where he kept emergency supplies for extended maintenance jobs, and figure out his next move from there. The first 8 minutes went perfectly. The corridors were empty, his access codes worked without triggering any alerts, and Zara remained calm and quiet against his chest. He was starting to think he might actually pull this off when he reached the final corridor before the cargo bay entrance. That was when he heard voices approaching from behind. Marcus pressed himself against the wall and tried to control his breathing as 2 security officers walked past, discussing some minor incident in the entertainment district. They did not notice him in the shadows, but their presence reminded him that he was far from safe. Once they discovered Zara was missing from her cage, the entire station would be locked down. He had maybe an hour before that happened, possibly less. He needed a better plan than hiding in a storage locker. As he stood there in the darkness, feeling Zara's steady breathing against his chest and thinking about the trust she had placed in him, Marcus realized that there was really only one option available to him. He could not hide her on the station indefinitely, and he could not turn her over to authorities who would just sell her to the same buyers who had been planning to collect her tonight. He was going to have to get her off the station entirely. The thought terrified him, but it also filled him with a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he was doing something that mattered, something that might actually make a difference in the universe, even if it was just for one small, scared creature who had never asked to be anyone's prisoner or trophy. Marcus took a deep breath, adjusted his jacket to make sure Zara was secure, and stepped out of the shadows toward Cargo Bay 7. Whatever happened next, at least he would be able to live with himself. Cargo Bay 7 hummed with the low vibration of automated loading systems working through the night shift. Marcus slipped through the entrance, his maintenance credentials granting him access without question. The bay was dimly lit, with only emergency lighting casting long shadows between the towering cargo containers and transport vessels docked at various loading arms. Zara shifted restlessly inside his jacket, probably sensing his elevated stress levels. Valdorians had excellent instincts for reading emotions, even as cubs. Marcus gently pressed his hand against his chest where she was nestled, offering what comfort he could while his mind raced through possibilities. He needed transportation off the station, but civilian passenger ships required identity verification and baggage screening that would expose Zara immediately. Cargo vessels might be easier to stow away on, but most were automated or minimally crewed, making it difficult to ensure they would reach a safe destination. Military ships were absolutely out of the question. That left the independent traders and freelance cargo haulers who operated on the edges of legal commerce. They asked fewer questions, cared more about payment than paperwork, and often had reasons of their own for avoiding too much official scrutiny. The problem was finding one that was departing soon and convincing them to take passengers they had not planned for. Marcus made his way deeper into the cargo bay, staying in the shadows between shipping containers while he scanned the docked vessels. Most were clearly automated cargo haulers with no crew quarters visible. A few showed signs of human occupation, but their loading ramps were sealed and their external systems indicated they were locked down for extended stays. Then he spotted something promising at docking arm 12. The ship was older than most of the others, a Corellian light freighter that had seen better decades, but was obviously well maintained. More importantly, its cargo ramp was partially open, with loading lights active and the soft glow of interior lighting visible. Someone was awake and working, which meant the crew was preparing for departure. Marcus checked the dock registry on a nearby terminal, using his maintenance access to pull up the ship's information. The vessel was called the Wandering Star, registered to Captain Sarah Reeves, an independent trader with a clean record but a reputation for taking unusual cargo jobs. According to the departure schedule, she was planning to leave within the next 2 hours for the Outer Rim territories. Perfect. The Outer Rim was exactly where a young Valdorian needed to be, far from council oversight and close to her natural habitat. The question was whether Captain Reeves could be persuaded to take on 2 unexpected passengers. Marcus approached the ship carefully, staying alert for any signs of security patrols. As he got closer, he could hear voices coming from inside the cargo hold, along with the sounds of equipment being secured for departure. He paused at the bottom of the ramp, suddenly uncertain about how to proceed. Walking onto someone's ship uninvited was a serious breach of spacer etiquette, not to mention several laws regarding trespassing and unauthorized boarding. But standing outside and shouting for attention would definitely attract the wrong kind of notice from station security. While he was still debating his options, a woman appeared at the top of the ramp. She was probably in her 40s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of lean, weathered appearance that came from years of working in space. Her clothes were functional rather than fashionable, and she moved with the confident ease of someone comfortable in her own domain. Captain Reeves, Marcus assumed. She spotted him immediately and studied him with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You lost maintenance tech? This is a private vessel, not a public walkway." Her tone was not hostile, but it was clear she expected an explanation for his presence. Marcus took a deep breath, acutely aware of Zara's warm weight against his chest, and decided that honesty might be his best option, or at least as much honesty as he dared to share. "Captain Reeves, my name is Marcus Chun. I need to ask you for a favor, and I'm willing to pay well for it." "Oh." She crossed her arms and leaned against the ramp frame. "What kind of favor requires sneaking around cargo bays in the middle of the night? And how well is well exactly?" Marcus reached into his back pocket and pulled out his personal credit chip, the one containing his entire savings account. 5 years of working double shifts and living in basic quarters had accumulated a respectable amount. 10,000 credits. For passage to the Outer Rim, no questions asked, and Complete discretion about your passengers. Captain Reeves raised an eyebrow. 10,000 for a simple passenger run? Either you're desperately stupid or desperately running from something. Neither makes me particularly eager to have you on my ship. I'm not running from anything I have done wrong, Marcus said carefully. But I'm trying to help someone who cannot help herself. Someone who will die if she stays on this station. Something in his tone must have caught her attention, because her expression softened slightly. Somewhat. Before Marcus could answer, Zara chose that moment to poke her head out of his jacket. She had been growing restless during the conversation, and his elevated heart rate was probably making her anxious. Her small silver head emerged near his collar, golden eyes blinking in the dim light as she looked around with curious interest. Captain Reeves stared at the cub for several long seconds, her face cycling through surprise, recognition, and what might have been anger. Is that what I think it is? She is just a baby, Marcus said quickly. 6 weeks old, maybe 7. Someone was keeping her in a cage, planning to sell her to buyers who would have hurt her. I could not let that happen. Do you have any idea what you have done? Reeves asked, her voice low and intense. That is a Valdorian cub, Class 5 dangerous species. If station security finds you with her, they will not just arrest you. They will execute you both and claim it was necessary for public safety. I know the risks. Marcus carefully adjusted his jacket to support Zara better as she continued to explore her new environment. But what was the alternative? Let them torture her? Turn her into a monster for their entertainment? She is just a child. Reeves was quiet for a moment, studying both Marcus and Zara with an unreadable expression. The cub had noticed her attention and was watching her with the same curious intensity, tilting her small head to one side in a gesture that was surprisingly endearing. You said she was being sold to buyers, Reeves said finally. Do you know who was handling the transaction? Station security officers were discussing pickup arrangements. I did not recognize the voices, but they mentioned someone arriving tonight. Reeves cursed creatively in what sounded like 3 different languages. Security officers. That means this goes all the way up the command chain. They're not going to just write off a missing shipment worth that much money. Marcus felt his heart sink. You will not help us. I did not say that. Reeves looked at Zara again, who had begun making soft chirping sounds that somehow conveyed both curiosity and friendliness. 20 years ago, I might have turned you in without a second thought. Hell, 10 years ago, I probably would have done it. But I have seen what happens to Valdorian cubs in the black markets. I have seen what the research facilities do to them. She paused, and Marcus caught a glimpse of old pain in her eyes. There was an incident on Kepler Station. A trader brought in a Valdorian family, claimed they were volunteers for a cultural exchange program. Turned out to be a cover story for a medical research project. By the time anyone figured out what was really happening, it was too late to save them. Marcus waited, not sure how to respond to the raw emotion in her voice. The adults died fighting to protect their cubs, she continued. The cubs died in laboratory cages, being tested to see how much pain they could endure before their healing factors gave out. The researchers published papers about their remarkable resilience and got promoted for their work. She looked directly at Marcus, and he saw steel in her gaze. I swore that day I would never be part of something like that again. So yes, I will help you. But we do this my way, and you follow my rules without question. Understood. Relief flooded through Marcus so powerfully that his knees nearly buckled. Understood. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. Getting off this station alive is going to be the easy part. Reeves gestured for him to follow her up the ramp. Come on. We need to get you both hidden before the security sweeps start. The interior of the Wandering Star was cramped but well organized, with every available space utilized for either cargo storage or essential systems. Reeves led him through the cargo hold and into a narrow corridor lined with cabin doors. My ship, my crew, my cargo, she said as they walked. As far as anyone else is concerned, you are temporary crew hired for this run. Your friend there is ship's mascot. Lots of traders keep exotic pets, so will not seem too unusual as long as she stays quiet during inspections. She is very intelligent, Marcus said. She understands when she needs to be quiet. Good, because our first test is coming sooner than I hoped. Reeves stopped at cabin door and pressed her palm to the access panel. I just got a message from Station Control. They're implementing emergency protocols and want to inspect all vessels before departure. We have maybe 20 minutes before they arrive. The cabin was small but comfortable, with a narrow bunk, a tiny desk, and storage lockers built into the walls. Reeves gestured for Marcus to sit on the bunk while she activated a sound-dampening field around the room. "Here's how this works," she said. "When the inspectors arrive, you are Marcus Chun, temporary hire for cargo handling and systems maintenance. You have been working for me for 2 weeks, and your paperwork is in order. If they ask about the cub, she's a Terran exotic that I picked up on my last run to Earth. Her species is rare, but not restricted, and she is fully vaccinated and documented." Marcus nodded, impressed by how quickly she had constructed a cover story. "What about when we reach the outer rim?" "That depends on where exactly you want to go and what your long-term plan is." Reeves sat down across from him, her expression serious. "Because once we leave this station, there's no going back. You will be a fugitive for the rest of your life, assuming the Council does not decide to make an example of you first." Marcus looked down at Zara, who had settled comfortably in his lap and was starting to doze. Her small body was completely relaxed, trusting him to keep her safe. The weight of responsibility was staggering, but also somehow comforting. For the first time in years, he was doing something that mattered. "I want to take her home," he said simply. "Back to Valder Prime, or as close as we can get. She belongs with her own people." Reeves smiled for the first time since they had met. "Now that is a plan I can respect. It is going to be dangerous, expensive, and probably impossible. When do we start?" The inspection team arrived exactly on schedule. 3 officers in pristine uniforms who boarded the Wandering Star with the kind of professional efficiency that made Marcus's stomach clench with anxiety. He sat in the cargo hold, wearing borrowed coveralls that identified him as crew, while Zara slept peacefully in a specially modified tool bag slung across his shoulder. Captain Reeves had been right about her being intelligent. When Marcus explained that they needed to play a game where she pretended to be something else, Zara had listened with the focused attention of someone who understood the stakes. The sound-dampening collar around her neck would muffle any vocalization she might make, and the bag was lined with materials that would confuse most scanning equipment. "Cargo manifest looks clean," the lead inspector announced, checking items off his digital pad as he examined the shipping containers. "Captain Reeves, your documentation shows this is a routine supply run to the mining colonies in Sector 7. "That is correct," Reeves replied smoothly. "Medical supplies, food concentrates, and replacement parts for atmosphere processors. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills." The inspector nodded and turned his attention to Marcus. "You are the temporary crew?" "Marcus Chun, sir. Cargo handling and systems maintenance." Marcus kept his voice level and professional, the way he had learned to do during his years working for demanding supervisors. "Captain Reeves hired me 2 weeks ago for this run. Previous employment? Station maintenance for 5 years before this. Atmospheric systems specialist." The inspector made notes on his pad without looking particularly interested. Routine cargo runs with temporary crew were common enough that Marcus's presence barely registered as noteworthy, which was exactly what they had been counting on. "What about the pet?" The second inspector had noticed Zara's small head poking out of the tool bag. "That is not a species I recognize." Marcus's heart rate spiked, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Terran exotic, rare breed from the old colonies. Captain Reeves says she brings good luck." Documentation. Reeves handed over a datapad containing what looked like completely legitimate vaccination records and species registration. Marcus had no idea how she had fabricated such convincing paperwork in 20 minutes, but he was grateful for her expertise. The inspector scanned the documents and handed the pad back without comment. "Keep it contained during transit. Some of the mining stations have strict quarantine protocols." "Of course," Marcus agreed. The inspection continued for another 10 minutes, but it was clearly routine. The officers were more interested in checking cargo seals and verifying manifest numbers than conducting a detailed search. They had no reason to suspect that the Wandering Star was carrying anything other than the supplies listed in its documentation. When they finally left, Marcus felt like he could breathe properly for the first time in hours. Zara emerged from the tool bag and stretched her small limbs. Chirping softly in what he had learned was her way of asking for attention. "Well done, both of you," Reeves said as she sealed the cargo bay and began final departure preparations. "We will be clear of station space in 30 minutes. After that, we can relax a little." The next several hours passed in relative calm as the Wandering Star made its way through normal shipping lanes toward the Outer Rim territories. Marcus spent most of the time in his assigned cabin, getting to know Zara better and trying to plan for their uncertain future. She was remarkably intelligent for such a young creature. Within a few hours of leaving the station, she had learned to recognize her name when spoken, understood basic commands like quiet and stay, and had figured out how to operate the cabin's waste recycling system. She was also incredibly affectionate, seeking out physical contact and purring contentedly when Marcus held her or petted her soft fur. It was hard to reconcile this gentle, playful creature with the dangerous predator classification that had condemned her to a life of captivity and exploitation. Marcus suspected that the Council's fears were based more on prejudice and misunderstanding than actual threat assessment. On their second day in space, Reeves knocked on his cabin door and invited him to join her on the bridge. The Wandering Star's command center was small and functional, with worn but well-maintained control stations arranged around a central pilot's chair. "We need to talk about our destination," she said, settling into her chair and pulling up a navigation display. "Valder Prime is deep in Council-restricted space. Even if we could get there, landing would be impossible without triggering every alarm system in the sector." Marcus studied the star chart, holding Zara in his arms while she watched the displays with fascination. "Are there any Valdorian colonies outside Council space?" "A few. Most of them are hidden settlements that keep to themselves and do not welcome strangers. But I know of one that might be different." Reeves highlighted a system near the edge of known space. "There's a planet called Haven in the Kepler Nebula. It was settled by refugees from various species, including some Valdorians who escaped Council persecution. Is it safe? Safer than anywhere else we're likely to find. The nebula makes it difficult to detect from a distance, and the settlers have an understanding with the local pirate clans. They provide medical services and technical expertise, and the pirates leave them alone." Marcus considered this. It was not the homeworld return he had imagined, but it sounded like a place where Zara could grow up free and safe. "How do we get there?" "Very carefully. We will need to make several stops to avoid drawing attention, and we will have to deal with some unsavory characters along the way. The direct route would take us through 3 different pirate territories and at least 1 active war zone." Before Marcus could respond, an alarm sounded from the ship's communication system. Reeves frowned and activated the incoming message display, revealing the stern face of a Council enforcement officer. "Attention vessel Wandering Star. You're ordered to heave to for immediate boarding and inspection. Any attempt to flee will be considered an act of piracy and will be met with appropriate force." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Somehow, they had been discovered. Reeves was already moving, her hands flying over the control panels as she brought the ship's defensive systems online. "How did they find us?" Marcus asked. "Does not matter now," Reeves replied grimly. "What matters is that we have a Council patrol ship on our tail, and they're not going to be satisfied with checking our cargo manifest." The ship shuddered as the patrol vessel fired warning shots across their bow. Zara chirped anxiously and pressed closer to Marcus, sensing the danger even if she did not understand its source. "Can we outrun them?" "Maybe. The Wandering Star is faster than she looks, and I know a few tricks they probably do not expect." Reeves engaged the ship's emergency acceleration, throwing them all back in their seats as the vessel surged forward. but we're going to have to abandon our original route. I am setting course for the asteroid fields in the Vega system. If we can reach them, we might be able to lose our pursuit in the maze. The next hour was the longest of Marcus's life. The wandering star raced through space while the Council Patrol ship gradually gained ground, its more powerful engines overcoming their initial head start. Reeves flew like someone who had spent decades dodging authority, using gravity wells and debris fields to mask their trajectory, but their pursuers were relentless. "They're getting ready to fire," Reeves announced as warning lights flashed on her control board. "Disable shots first, probably targeting our engines." Marcus held Zara tighter, feeling her small body trembling with fear. After everything they had been through, it seemed impossible that their journey would end here, caught between stars with nowhere to run. Then, salvation appeared in the form of 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace directly between the wandering star and their pursuers. The vessels were clearly pirates, painted in aggressive colors, and bristling with weapons that had been added without regard for aesthetic appeal. "Council ship, this is Captain Torres of the Free Company," a gruff voice announced over the communication channels. "You are in violation of the Vega Accords by pursuing vessels through neutral space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The Council Patrol ship hesitated, clearly not expecting to encounter organized resistance. Pirates were typically more concerned with profit than principle, and they rarely interfered with official law enforcement operations. "This is Council business," the enforcement officer replied. "The vessel you are protecting is carrying stolen property and fugitive criminals." "The vessel we are protecting is carrying paying customers," Torres responded. "And their business is legitimate according to local law. You have 10 seconds to change course before we demonstrate why the Free Company has never lost a ship in these territories." Marcus watched in amazement as the pirates moved into attack formation, their weapons systems locked onto the patrol ship. The council officer must have decided that pursuing one stolen cub was not worth starting a war with an entire pirate clan, because after a few tense moments, the patrol ship turned away and jumped back in hyperspace. Wandering star asterisk. "This is Torres." The pirate captain's voice continued. "Follow our lead ship to Haven Station. Someone there wants to meet you." Later, as they docked at the hidden station built into a hollowed-out asteroid, Marcus learned the truth about their rescue. Captain Reeves had been more than just a trader with a conscience. She was part of an underground network that smuggled refugees and rescued victims of council persecution. The pirates who had saved them were allies in that cause, protecting those who could not protect themselves. Haven Station was everything Reeves had promised, and more. The corridors bustled with dozens of different species, all living and working together in harmony. Children of various races played together in the common areas while their parents went about their daily business without fear. Most importantly for Marcus and Zara, there was a small community of Aldorians who had made the station their home. When they met Zara for the first time, their reaction was immediate and emotional. She was not just another refugee to them. She was family, a child of their people who had been saved from a terrible fate. Elder Kareth, the leader of the Valdorian community, took Zara gently in her massive arms and spoke to her in the musical language of their homeworld. The cub's response was immediate and joyful, chirping and purring as she recognized sounds she had never heard but somehow remembered. "She will be safe here," Kareth told Marcus, her golden eyes filled with gratitude. "She will learn our ways, our history, our songs. She will grow up free and proud of what she is." Marcus felt tears on his cheeks as he watched Zara interact with her newfound family. This was what he had dreamed of during those long, dangerous weeks in space. This was why he had risked everything. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus found his own place in the community. His technical skills were highly valued, and his willingness to risk his life for someone who could not help herself had earned him respect throughout the station. He watched Zara grow and flourish, learning to speak both human standard and her native Valdorian, developing the confidence and strength that would serve her well as an adult. Sometimes he wondered what would have happened if he had followed regulations that night in Cargo Bay 7. If he had walked away from Zara's cries and pretended he had never found her. The thought always made him grateful that he had chosen compassion over compliance, love over law. The universe was vast and often cruel, but it also contained people willing to stand up for those who could not stand up for themselves. Marcus had learned that sometimes the most important rules were the ones written in the heart rather than in any official handbook. And sometimes breaking the wrong rules was the most right thing a person could do.